Just before we start, there is going to be spoilers from the anime, and I will say right now before I forget that I haven't read the manga for this, so I'm actually not sure if the manga goes more in depth with certain character development or if there's like other important aspects with the manga that would help with my argument in this upcoming video, but we'll see. But aside from that though, yeah, Death Note, really good anime, great story, a lot of it delves a lot into religion, like a fuck ton, right? There's like a lot of religious references. We have, of course, we have Ryuk, right? Which, if you look up the name or like try to find the meaning of it, apparently it's 6 in Roman numerals in Korean, which I found to be pretty interesting, right? Related to the whole like angel numbers or whatnot, the whole 666. Then there's Apple, of course, with like the Adam and Eve apple thing, right? That whole religious tale. And hell, even the Death Note itself, right? You could even it's kind of like a symbolism for the Bible in a sense, or like the Holy Scripture, whatever religious belief you believe, right? And before I go any further with that, I just want to say real quick that throughout this video as well, I'm gonna be referring to like the higher up being as God to stay more like religious neutral, right? Like, I'm not gonna try to lean into any religion because I don't think that's really fair or appropriate. It's not even the main message of this video, so I just want to address that before we move on. But either way, though, there's like a lot of religious references, and there's a lot of things that somewhat tie into religion, and of course, that's not the main focus of the show, right? It plays a good bit, but it helps to like the sort of story development, the sort of build up with character development and all that, especially with two very interesting characters. But for the most part, it happens within most of the show. And these two characters I'm gonna look more in depth into is Light Yagami and L, right? So we're gonna start off with Light Yagami because well, that's a bit easier, and we have a lot more information about him than say L, right? So Light Yagami, we start off with him in high school, and we understand like okay, he has a sense of justice. He wants to go out there and fight for good and do all these like great things in the world, right? As such, he's trying to go into university to be a police officer or to be a detective of that sorts, and work his way towards that field. But at the same time, he's noticing that there's like a high like spike in crime, and he's just like, oh well, I don't like this. This sucks. And then magically, the Death Note just appears just because Rick was like, "Oh shit, I fucked up. I derped it." Don't know why the accent. Fuck it up. But yeah, he's like, "Oh shit, I fucked up." And then Light gets the Death Note, learns a lot about the Death Note, and understands like how to like keep his identity hidden and like knowing like, okay, well, this is how I should use the Death Note. This is how I can, not be arrested, right? Essentially, or like how his dad could have found it because he's also a police detective for remembrance, right? So there's that. And at this point, this is like as soon as he gets a Death Note, this is where all the descent just starts to go right, like right at the beginning, because from there, he has all of this power. He has literally the power of God or a godlike figure at the least, right? And as such, he tries to use that power for good, right? Like, he doesn't go out just killing innocent civilians at first. He uses it to kill a bunch of criminals he sees on TV, write their names down, and then boom, they get a heart attack, which, another fun fact, also a religious thing, at least in the Quran. I'm not sure about the Holy Bible or any other scripture or anything like that, but anyways, it's like an act of punishment also in a way, right? Because like, yeah, as I mentioned, the whole Holy Scripture thing. But that's aside the points. Light Yagami wants to sort of punish these criminals and you bring them justice, and then all of a sudden, the police force is like, wait a minute, it's kind of bad what he's doing, We should like stop him. He's kind of a fucking maniac. Like, obviously they don't know who it is. They don't know it's Light Yagami, but they go on a whole detective search, and that's where L is introduced. And then we started seeing like the sort of like back and forth court, like the mental mind game basically between L and Light, where they always have like each move on each other. But when we also see them more and more often, like we get to see them like talk to their close subordinates, then we start to realize that they're very similar with one another, aside from, of course, morals and the actions that they do, of course, right? They're very similar in terms of like their thinking process and their mentality, their sort of ego, if you will, right? Because for the most part, they both have a really huge ego throughout the entire show, right? Or ego, confidence, whatever you may deem it to be. And with Light, of course, it's like he has the power of a godlike figure with the Death Note, and so he's going to go out and besiege punishment among like all the criminals and such, right? And L has a sense of justice and duty, this like courageousness where it's like I can find L, I'm going to stop this maniac, I'm going to serve justice so that no other innocent lives can be taken away. You know, because you still have to think about the fact like yeah, there are criminals in prisons, but not all of them are terrible, right? Like of course there are some terrible people in prisons, but still, you can't just go around killing criminals recklessly. You know, just morally speaking, that's not a really good thing to do in general. It's just nah. So yeah, there's that, and so you know, L wants to upheat to that standard. Light wants to upheat to his standards. They clash. A lot of arguments and fighting goes on, and then from there on, you really start to see the descent of Light, where like he goes from I want to kill only criminals to now I want power. I want to create my own utopia. Anybody who stops me from my mission, from my uh like besiegement and punishment, or just all these sort of like what he deems to be holy or like the like good things for the world, they like he will kill basically, right? And then a lot of that at this point we start seeing more innocent lives actually being taken away, or like those who are a bit more corrupt start to die as well throughout all this. And then we start to get more and more people who have more knowledge about Light Yagami's actions, and then more people start to replicate him when there's another Death Note that comes up with Misa, right? And then there's like like all this sort of cascades almost, and so it's like this like big pot, right? Like this big pot of just horrible shit going on, right? Like everybody, you know, well, it's like almost everyone has the access or the power of God, and they all treat it, or they all go about it in like this really shitty manner. Like they don't do it in like a way where it's like all fair and all forgiving, merciful, equal, all this sort of stuff that you know some would associate God for, right? But you know, there's like a but at the same time though, like as humans, since again we have like this huge ego in our like mindsets, right? Like because a lot of us, especially in Western culture, we have this sort of mindset where we're like the main character, we're the ones who's going to bring justice and to be the ones to save all, right? And with Death Note, they really emphasize that whole point further, and they show like the entire thing throughout. Like, oh, there's like some benefits. You feel like this ecstasy almost, where it's like, oh my god, yes, I'm doing great things. I am so powerful. I have all this like great shit going on. But then it all like the cookie eventually crumbles at some point, and then you know with L, right, like continue onto this journey of trying to stop Light Yagami from just going ballistic. He ends up dying throughout this entire thing. Then Light gets his basically punishment essentially through sort of like a reincarnation almost in a weird sense. I'm not sure if again the manga they go more in depth with Nier, right? Because like because I'm referring to Nier this because like he's Nier and L are very similar to each other, very fucking like the design of each other and like all this, and it's nuts. It's crazy how similar they are. It's like almost ironic, but uh, but yeah, like so like the resurrection of L, it's like all right, I'm gonna fight back. I'm gonna go ahead and just like destroy you and gets his ascent, and then eventually, like Yagami dies, and then he falls, and then like all of his power goes away, and like everybody just ends up losing at the end. Like nobody wins in this situation, except maybe Nier, right? But what can we take away from all this? You know, I just spouted out a bunch of bullshit that you probably already knew from the beginning, but what does this all mean, right? Well, what I take away from this is that ego is the killer of all man. Okay? Now, to some extent, it's actually beneficial. Like, if you use. Because I believe there's a big difference between confidence and arrogance, you know? And ego is that sort of like fuel for sort of like gauging between that confidence and arrogance, right? It's like a sort of slider almost. So, like, if we were to put this in a spectrum, we have confidence on like sort of like the good side, but then arrogance is sort of like this bad side, right? and you're like somewhere in this middle area of the spectrum. Now, depending on your actions and your mindset throughout a lot of things in life, you could end up more into the confidence if you decide to use that ego for good and just for the sake, or benefits for yourself, right? Like if you don't think like, oh well, I'm the all powerful, almighty, whatever, and don't try to pretend like a godlike figure or whatnot, or just try not to like dominate a blah blah blah. Have like an open mind as well. Like so many different crap, so much different crap going on. Then yeah, you will go into like the more confident side of things. Whereas, if you pretend to, if you go on the whole light Yagami route, basically, right? Then all of a sudden you're gonna see that descent that you would see in Death Note, along with other characters that you don't see for long, but you still see that like descent anyways, right? It still happens. So, and so this leads on to another point where it's about like this whole power lust, this whole humanity aspect of things as well, right? And, like there's like so much crap that I can go on into, but I mean, when we think about it more in depth, Light Yagami obviously has a power lust. Like that's like straight, like it's pretty obvious right there, right? But so does L as well. L wants to like go for Light Yagami, like mainly for the sake of justice, of course, but also prove a point and to be like, yes, I was correct. I'm the one who's right. Because like later, like throughout the anime, you also see Light, or not Light, sorry, L frustrated in the fact that like, oh, I didn't get Light. Oh, I didn't like solve this case. I'm sure it's like it's gotta be him, right? But you also see some of the police force being like, well, why do you really think it's Light? Maybe it's just not him. Like why that doesn't make sense. Blah blah blah. Considering like the cutting acts that Light has done to sort of set himself up for success and all this sort of stuff, right? Yeah. Like eventually, now you could argue, like, oh, L had this intuition in his head, like he knew from the start, or for like the longest period of time, like, oh yeah, Light is Kira, or Light is this like killer of all these criminals and even innocent people as well. But I mean, he didn't really had hard evidence. He didn't really, like he had an intuition, but he didn't have hard evidence. And even sometimes with L as well, sometimes he was a bit unsure about whether Light was actually Kira or like the killer or not, right? And he even like brought like the whole percentage scale. It's like, yeah, I feel like 3% certain that you're Kira. Oh, I'm 1% certain. Now I'm 0.5. Now I'm back to 0.2. Like it's still low percentage numbers. It's like it's like a confidence in that. So, but either way though, there was like I know I'm kind of like rambling. I go like all over the place, but there's also another aspect of fear when it comes to like this whole like getting a lot of power, and that's something I want to quickly touch on because when you have a lot of power, when you have like so much power to the point where you can take somebody's life away, or you can pretend to be like a godlike figure, as a human, right, we are going to experience a lot of fear, and we are going to be very fearful of a lot of like this big responsibility among us because, well, it's hard to just sort of make that sort of big decision of like, yeah, I want to take this guy's life. Yeah, I want to kill him. I want to kill him off. To do all this sort of crap, right? Or just make big decisions in general. And I only wanted to touch on that because I did want to mention, if you were to be of like in a leadership position, or you were to strive for that sort of like power or that like like all that sort of stuff. Power comes with a lot of responsibility. And I just want to say this right now, in case if you're going through that, just like try to be very responsible with it. Try to make sure you have like this more like mature mindset of it, and of course more knowledge too, if that helps. So there's all this too, and like all of these factors, right? Like a lot of these factors, when we all put it all together, we can see the descent of Light Yagami and L making sense to each other, right? Because like as I mentioned before, they're both very similar characters to each other. They're both filled with a lot of justice, some bit of pride as well. They are not emotionally driven, they're actually emotionally detached for the most part, which is cool. Cool to know. And they also have like a sense of fear despite the amount of power that they have. And even to an extent, they're both immature, right? Because, well, immature in the sense of like, they want to like just go at it. They want to have like this sort of they have this rush, this like adrenaline rush, like I need to take action right now. I have to be the knight in shining armor, do all this and that, like have this, all this sort of crap, right? And you know, when you have this sort of rushed mindset, this immature mindset of like, yes, I could go ahead and do this. I am destined to do this. This is who I am because I am all powerful, almighty, whatever. Then that's going to lead to a descent at some point. You know, that's going to lead you to just sort of just end up in this whole spiral of fucked up situations, and therefore a lot more responsibilities. And like the one thing I will say, like if you have the larger your ego will be, and the more you strive for power, sure, the more power you may get, but also the more responsibilities. Because again, mentioned previously, with great power comes great responsibility, but with little power comes little responsibility. So it's up to you to make that sort of decision, and I hope that, like myself, you also look at Death Note and see it as sort of like a life lesson in terms of power, ego, and then just also knows like the religious references every now and then, which I think is pretty neat. so so yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. And before I end this video, how do you guys like this new angle? I think I like this angle. I don't know. You can't really see my mouth a lot or all that sort of stuff. There's also the audio quality too, which I noticed it's a bit tinny, but that's because I haven't treated my room and all that and like put the blankets and whatever. So, just let me know if all of this looks good or if there's like anything I could do in terms of like better production or stuff like that. Because what was it? I know like my editing is sort of like bare minimum, especially with stuff like that. Well, this is a bit more like up at the top usually, but unless I don't edit this at all, I have no clue. um, you know, a lot of this for me, I feel like I don't need to edit a whole lot. I feel like my points are sort of like provided right there, and then I can explain things pretty well, right? But again, if you, what is it? If anything is confused, or like if you feel like visual representation would be much better, let me know, because I like to know if I should add more like anime clips so that like I can emphasize my point further. I tried that a bit with my last video with Black Lagoon, and I haven't checked out the stats on that yet, but I'll definitely be sure to check those out in case if you guys left any comments there. And you know, I'm trying to grow as a content creator. I want to see like if what I'm doing is correct or not, or like a good direction, sort of, you know. Because again, I'm just messing around with my content. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm going somewhere. so yeah, that's all I gotta say. And of course, we're gonna end up with the beatbox. Pew 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 pew.